Welcome to the Life Burst podcast. Life Burst bonus here. We're going to be talking about the Muzica deck. By Muzica, I mean diagram, but Muzica Center deck. I had some advice that it would be easier for you guys to see some of the stuff if I actually could show you the cards here. I don't exactly know why they're there. We go, coming up like this. So I'm going to try to do it in this new format from here on. But this is the list. You guys can see the main deck here. Pause it if you need to. Top deck here for the Lrig deck. Pause it if you need to. Great. We're going to start talking about it now. So let's talk about the Muzica diagram deck. Okay, so I have put this one off to last because I literally started lagging on it because there's so much to talk about and so little to give you guys information wise. So what I want to do is I just want to discuss how flexible this team is. Now you got to bear in mind that Muzica as a center, right? Let me see if I can get it. Muzica Vogue 3 has so much ability to basically do anything, right? Like we just talked about in a podcast that we recorded, how to deck build, and we talked about what happens when you're making good stuff deck, and this is a good stuff deck. Well, your goal for that is you're going to want to specifically create direction for yourself to go with, and you're going to want to play the most powerful cards in that generic direction, right? Because Muzica, growing cost 2, has the team diagram constant during your turn. The signy in the opponent's center gets negative 2,000 power. Its enter ability is you get a signy from your hand, and then once a game action, you can return a level 1 diagram Lrig assist on your field to the Lrig deck. Right, so there is no direction built in this other than you want to have a pretty good level 1 assist with this that you can double play, and that you probably like taking some stuff out of your graveyard. That being said, you can build this in many different options, so you can kind of change this to suit your playstyle. Inevitably, this is going to end up in a more late game mid-range type of deck that you're going to be playing, so because of that, it gives you a tiny bit of direction to go off of. The only other direction that we can kind of get is Salvage the Future here, which that piece allows you to take the top 15 cards of an opponent's deck and trash it, or get up to 3 cards without the guard from your trash to your hand. Again, it sort of says, all right, if you're going late game, go for basically drawing 3 good cards, and if you're trying to get some Life Crush, some free refresh damage, then maybe go for the number 1. So there's not a lot to go off of in terms of direction. You have to give it your own direction, which is why in this one is crazy Life Burst mini. I'm going to talk about 2 different decks that I've created for this team, as well as a third that can exist on set 2 when that comes out. But we're going to go over why I'm making these decisions, and hopefully that'll inform you what you're going for. I think the first thing to start on is always going to be, because of your level 3 is tossing a level 1 assist back to your hand, that you should always talk about level 1 assists, right? And so we have here Senga Aerial. I really like the ability to give Lancer on command, specifically this early in the game. AKA, you can do this turn 2 and attack with Lancer. There's so little ability to interact with your opponent's attack step on turn 2, turn 3, right? And I'm talking about like it's my turn 1 really, or my turn 2. So I love this ability, and then you can kind of sandbag it a little bit later. And then when the opponent's out of enter, or the opponent is out of tricks, you can throw in a second one and it'll get you 2 damage in here. Yes, is Lancer better than like, I don't know, a red that opens up a lane? The answer is probably not, but the ability to still kind of grind your opponent's resources out and then also Lancer over is pretty good, and I like that because it lets this deck have the ability to keep pace with some of the more aggressive decks if it's trying to go with a trying to race you out game, specifically if you're against a slower deck, a control deck, and you're like, all right, I need to get some early damage in here. And this deck kind of lacks early lane openings because black generally is better at the late game openings. So is green better at the late game openings, lane openings. So I like getting Lancer on here. The other one here is, I think it's Muzica Float, right? Here's the float. Here it is. The ability to discard a card and then draw 3 cards lets you really dig deep and also put some stuff in there for later. You got to remember that with Muzica, you're going to get a card back from your graveyard anyway. So discarding a card, you might be like, yeah, this is bad in my opening hand, but good later on. Let me grab these other cards that are good now and then get this card later back. So I like this one. I also like the ability that if I'm going to reuse this level 1, I'm reusing it for a late game. So it's kind of, they balance each other out. Ariel says, I'm going to try to have a more aggressive game and a shorter game, whereas Muzica Float says, I'm going to try to have a longer game. So having those abilities to just basically double down on one of those abilities, I think is quite worth it. I think Muzica can be flopped out for some other Mudocas, level 1s and level 2s included, later down the line. But right now I'm happy with these types of things. Then let's talk about the level 2s. We got Muzica Clap. Muzica Clap is a great way if I'm saying I'm going a long game, I need to down a bunch of different things. That's why I end up going with this route. There are some cheaper Mudocas that also not vanish, but put on the bottom of the deck if you're trying to lane open. So that's an optional swap in there. Muzica Senga's Strike. I like the ability to do a 2-enter to vanish anything. That's kind of rare in green. And then this is overcosted, but is going to be something that you can do the next time you take damage's turn. Instead, you do not take that damage. You can do against aggro decks. I like it against No Limit because you could pull this off potentially against their piece, and that will stop the double crush damage. Moving right along, there's 2 pieces that we should talk about. We should talk about Salvage the Future. Here's a tip for Salvage the Future. You guys might not know exactly how Refresh works, and that's because it was unclear until January of this year as to how it works. But you finish whatever action is currently happening prior to refreshing. So, for example, if there's only 2 cards left in the opponent's library and they're searching the top 3, they're only looking at the top 2 and they resolve it, then they refresh. Likewise, draw is the same deal. So you really want to aim for this to happen on when they have 16 cards left in their library, if you can help it. So that way, that turn, the following turn, they draw 1, they finish their draw phase, have to refresh, and they don't get to draw the second card. It's kind of interesting. You should look at the specific refresh rules, since you are technically a mill deck, for the specifics and make sure that you're using it to its advantage. You also should note that it's pretty good against MC Lion for Endless Punchline, because that deck is thinning itself out throughout its whole thing. Inevitably, when you use this, you can kind of toss their entire graveyard back into their deck and then undo everything that they were trying to do to set up for their Endless Punchline. Generally speaking, I'll do that, and then if I'm going to a later game, I'll go ahead and draw some extra cards. Probably only do this against Uchu, so that way I have enough to eventually try to kill them with it. And then the last thing is, and this piece could be swapped out for anything. I just have a generically good piece here. Chime of the Blessed Key. Chime of the Blessed Key allows you to draw 3 cards and discard 2. Your deck kind of likes having self-mill in it, so the discarding 2 is actually pretty relevant for you. And you'll see why later down the line. Let's go ahead and talk about our main deck here. Starting out at level 1s, of course, you have Servant is your 4 of always. After that, we've got 4 Gap here. Nope, excuse me, that's not a level 1. The level 1 is Ball. Ball is Doomed Evil. It lets you put the top 3 cards of your deck into your trash, and then it has a pretty okay life burst, which is you can pay black and a colorless. If you do, Signy gets negative 12,000 power till end turn. So it's a paid removal, but removal nonetheless. And black has trouble with early game removal, so this is fine a little early on to deal with things. Mainly you're using it for that self-mill and not a ton else. The other 4-drops that we're running in this deck are going to be for, let's see here, Imps. And that's just because Imp has blue in it, and I need a little bit of blue to deal with Madoka Clap. And also for Gap Doomed Angel, which we'll talk about in a second. And mostly because it's a hybrid. This has a hard time being ran over by level 1 Signies because of its power. So that's the reason to use your level 1s. Also, it's worth mentioning that there's really not much from set 0/0 that you can add to this deck. So you're kind of restricted on your black that you can do because that's all virtual synergy stuff, and this doesn't care about virtual synergies. I also run for, oh god, Tiffany said it just yesterday, no Boribetsu. No Boribetsu in this deck. It has a lot of text on it, but over significantly simplified. It basically says, if there's an open lane, you can throw this bear in front of that lane, and then if it moves, then you can pay 2 enter, and you can grab something from your enter zone and replace it with that. So you can swap this in the enter zone with something else. There's a combo here, and I'll talk about that combo briefly, with Gap. Gap says it has an enter ability that you can put target white, red, blue, green level 1 Signy from your trash to your field for the cost of 1 enter. So the kind of trick is that you can do the bear. Here it is. You can play bear, grab this out of your enter zone, swap it out, and then when you do, you can lane fill that other lane that has been opened that it moved to, so that way you are keeping your lane filled. It's a little expensive to do so, but hey, if you're stalling, this is always an okay combo to do. And if you're like, I can't afford it, you can just not do it also, and that's perfectly fine. This is a life burst of being able to do, again, the black and colorless, and you can give something negative 12,000 till end of turn. We're running a lot of removal options here because of Dark Engie, but that is our level 1s in a nutshell. You can change out your imps to spice with the gas that is a green-black multicolor if you really wanted to go more into that color and combo. I wanted it again just because I think 6 is sort of the bare minimum enough to fuel, along with your multicolored over here, but you're rarely entercharging this stuff, to fuel your one of level 2 or level 1 effects. So that's why I end up going with this option. Plus, I have enough green that I shouldn't be worried about Senga, and I'm not necessarily going off Senga anyways, that I should be fine with that. So there's our level 1s. Let's talk about our other level 2. We have some gaps here, but we also run a few helium natural element. I like this as a wall. I like it. I mostly it's a holdover from my my Dr. Tamago decks, but this is a pretty good okay thing to put out. It's a good enough wall that it dodges most removal and still walls out the early aggro, while simultaneously just being annoying for the opposite deck to deal with, because if they vanish it, then you can down the Lrig on their field. So you can go ahead and just be like, yeah, this is just, it's just like the bear and Gap. It's just annoying enough that they have to deal with it before they can get to your life cloth. And if you're getting to that late game, that's when things really start going towards your direction, your favor here. And we don't play any other level 2s aside from Kazumi, Code Mage here. And again, you could choose to go with more Kazumi if you wanted. I just wanted a little bit more blue. I think Kazumi is a very strong card. It has the ability of, when it enters, you can rearrange all the Signy on your opponent's field, as well as the constant ability. As long as this is in the center, it's 12,000 power, which is a huge wall. And its text for the life burst is to enter charge 1, and then you can negate a Signy attack. Just lets you stall a little bit longer, get a little bit more resources for your removal spells with your enter charge 1. Another trick with this is that since you get to rearrange all the Signy on your opponent's field, you can take they're probably going out of their way to make sure that their level 1 2000 power thing is not in the center lane, because during your turn the opponent's center lane gets negative 2000. Well, you can just go ahead and swap that for and say, here's the lane that's open now because of that. Also lets you just be able to be like, let me take that 12,000, make it a 10,000. Now I can attack it with my 12,000 and it's dead. Something, or excuse me, your 10,000 and now it's dead. So you can do it to that kind of advantage too. I like this. I would have liked to figure out ways to put more in there if I could. But for now, I like Helium, and that's fine. Moving on to our level 3s, we've got Dark Engie. Dark Engie is just a generically good black card. I think inevitably if you're like, all right, well, I figured out 10 out of my 12 slots for my black-based deck, what should I put in there? Dark Engie is just a good thing to throw in there. It's sort of like baseline, and will always be good in the deck that I think it's good in. In this specific deck, you've got a bunch of removal. The gaps are removal. You've got a bunch of life burst that's removal, but then you also have various vanishing effects here. You get 2 of them even with Arcanus, and so it charges itself pretty quickly. Moving right down the line, you've got your team Signy here with Landling type Dre. It has the auto ability whenever this attacks, you can put the top 5 cards of your deck or the opponent's deck into the trash. This will help you manipulate that piece more easily and be like, how many do you got in there? You've got 21. Okay, you've got 16 now, and now you are set up for me to do my my thing where I'm denying you one try. Salvage the future is what it's called. Its enter ability here is targeted opponent's Signy gets negative 5,000. If you have 20 or more in your trash, it gets negative 10,000. Usually the 5,000 is enough to do whatever you need to do, especially combined with your center Lrig. But you might need to get that 10,000 occasionally. It feeds itself in order to do the 10,000. Maybe you play some gaps, etc., etc. You should be good. Not gap. Ball. I always confuse the two. It's a good card. You should play it. I'm playing 4 in this one, and I wouldn't play it really in any other deck. So there's that. Then I've got Arcanus. I think that's how you pronounce it. Akunis type Dre. This comes in the starter deck. It's got an auto ability of whenever the Signy is vanished, you may pay colorless. If you do the Signy in front of it, gets negative 10,000 until end of turn. This is pretty good because it just is sticky, and the opponent then has to decide whether or not they're willing to lose their an open lane for you to your attack phase, or if they want to just sort of let this stick around, and it's fine since you're trying to get to that late game too. You also have the ability here to give something negative 3,000 for each different color of Signy on your field. Right now, I think there's not a ton of good black Signy. There's not a ton of good blue or green Signy from the previous sets. So you kind of need to spread out and be a little bit more rainbowy, which is why I actually really like Arcanus. I like it a lot for that reason. And it's also defensive. It weirdly has things it can do on your opponent's turn. And that's so rare in this game that it's kind of worth just a nod just because of that. I think it's pretty good. If you're doing a more rainbow build, you should probably run this. Then the last one is Quinn. Quinn just makes combat math for your opponent difficult. It also moves your opponent's Signy around, which helps with your center's ability. Just really, like, you can give it to the center, and then you're giving something negative 4,000 till end of turn. If you got 2 of these, you're doing so much to do that. So I really suggest you can go up in the number of Quinns if you wanted to. You don't have to just run 1. I'm just running 1 just to get a little bit more green in the deck as well. But you theoretically could go down on, like, your Arcanus or your Landlings, or maybe even your Dark Engies, and provide more of these. The last thing is your spell, which is going to be Enervating Melody. It just basically it's just removal. It's just removal. And it's a solid removal at that. Killer artwork. So, it plays the job of doing some lane opening for you. It's an early game lane opening too, which is pretty rare in this deck because most of your lane openings are level 3s and higher. So, that's what I would do. You might be asking, can I get some more lane opening at level 1, level 2? The answer is not really. They're not very powerful. So I just chose not to run them. You have options at that point. but I don't think they're very good, so I wouldn't personally do it. However, if you wanted to be more of a removal here, I think one of the things that you can do is, I call this the rock deck. Look, so the deck, the rock in Magic the Gathering, is all about just like some resource grinding and a lot of board control stuff. So this is my attempt at doing a little bit more board controlling if you're trying to go more to that style of things. And what you'll see here, the major changes here, is I made a better servant because this is definitely the correct servant art for this. Outside of that, I took out the Bear Gap combo. I added a dagger, a level 1 dagger-y person. Where is that card? Oh, it's somewhere. Fraudulently lightly armed. And it's not very great, but it gives you just a little bit more early game removal. Especially since I'm not gap bearing, there's no real reason for me to go elsewise. I added on the level 3 Phantom Terror Beast God. This says that whenever it attacks, if you've enter charged, basically, right, then you can pay green and white. If you do, you can vanish. Sorry, green and colorless. If you do, you can vanish opponent's Signy with 12,000 or more. Might be hard to reach that, but its enter abilities, you can give 2 target Signies plus 5,000 powers. You can give that to your opponent's Signy to hit that requirement and then vanish it if you need to. There's a little bit more enter charging in this deck because of that. I have Muzica. Whenever it attacks, you can enter charge. So it just does a little bit more enter charging for you. I also went higher up on the number of where is it called? Dark Engie. And that's because when Dark Engie, you enter charge whenever anything becomes power 0 or less. So there's a lot of removal in this, and that's kind of where this also comes from, just the ability to give more removal. And it will allow you to then just get more enter charging. So that's sort of one of the tricks with it, is you're focusing a little bit more on enter charging, focusing a little bit more on removal spells. That's why you've got the Anna here to do some more removal-esque types of spells here. Yeah, so overall, that's what I'm doing. I've also got 2 Falconor in here, just because it's a generically good green card, and again, I just want a little bit of, generically good blue card, and I just want a little bit of blue to be able to, you can see I've got a little bit more blue here on this front too with the multicolors, just so that way I can get Madoka clap in here. As you can see, I haven't changed up pretty much anything on the Lrig deck. I thought about it, but then sort of decided against it. You theoretically could. Most of the Sengas are good. Pretty much all of the Madokas are good choices. You can change them up to spice however you want for your local meta. This is just an option to show how vastly different just some tweaks can make your entire deck. So this one's clearly more focused on removal and grinding out the board state specifically. Now, just to talk a little briefly about other things that you can do, and talk about, again, how flexible this deck is. In set 02, there's a black card, I believe it's the secret rare, and a blue card that I also believe is one of the secret rares, that care about discarding. Well, you have some discarding options in blue and some discarding options in black, especially in set 2. So you can go and change up your Madokas to the discard Madokas, and you have much more access to discard. There's even Assault Cerberus if you really wanted to swip out Chime for Assault Cerberus to give yourself some more options for discard. Plus you can run the spell Random Drain, which will give you even more discard, probably more than you need elsewise, and you can start getting those secret rares to tick with their, if the opponents discard 2 or more cards this turn. You can get that stuff running. Now, that's just an option to show you how flexible this is. And this deck will continue to be flexible for its entire time in the meta. You can change it up to spice. You can say, I want to be more board control. I want to be more aggro. I want to be more mid-range. I want to be more focused on Lancer shenanigans. I want to be more big green stompy. I want more Enercharge. This deck can pull it off, is really the answer. Diagram has a lot of flexibility. However, that then puts a lot of pressure back on you to try to be the best deck builder you can be and tweaking things for your meta. Does Diagram... I'm not going to go over the normal, like, here's some alternate cards you can throw in, because there's a lot of alternate cards that you can throw in, and I've just shown you at least 2 different decks worth of alternate cards. Does Diagram hold its water in set 2 and beyond? The answer is yes, and in fact, unlike the other decks, where sometimes swapping out your center Lrig vastly changes what your deck's trying to accomplish, it doesn't when Muzica comes out, and it doesn't so much when Senga comes out. They're all sort of mid-range control, big green, blue freeze, blue discard, black removal, muddy, directionless types of decks that you can then put into to play whatever you want. You can swap it out one week and run more of a Muzica center. You can swap it out the next week and do more of a Muzica center. It won't matter too much, and the cards that you're playing won't change all that much, so you have the ability to do that type of thing. Now, Muzica itself becomes, I think, a little less prominent after set 2 gets introduced, and Muzica starts becoming a little more prominent when set 2 comes out. It will continue to be kind of like that. Senga is sort of the least prominent, but between the 3 of them, they keep up steady results in the Japanese meta all the way up till set 4's release. And when set 4 releases and DMX starts becoming more popular, this deck goes down in popularity a little bit. However, once the Dream Teams start getting introduced after DMX's arrivals in set 6 and forward, you'll end up breaking teams more often than you'd think. And Senga, I've seen that Senga can break teams, and I've seen that Muzica can break teams and both be pretty good and play sort of similar playstyles. So it's not like these, for example, these centers or these individual team pieces will lose their value over time. They will stay somewhat, at least tier 2 playable throughout their entire lifetime. Sometimes they dip to tier 1. Sometimes they peak to tier 1, sometimes they dip down to tier 2, but they always stay in some kind of range of playability. So it's got a good shelf life. With that in mind, that's pretty much all you need to know about this type of deck. Of course, if you guys have any interesting things to add to what I've said, feel free to comment down below. If you want to keep up to date with some deck techs, some different meta choices, set reviews, etc., just random podcasts me and Tiffany do, go ahead and subscribe, and we will see you in the future. And I hope, as always, may you flip a life burst.